I'm Rip Rapson. I'm the president of the Kresge Foundation, and the economic downturn in many ways has been an opportunity for Kresge to stress its priorities, to understand whether we're in the right direction, and if we are in the right direction, whether we could be doing things even more powerfully in pursuit of the kinds of values and strategies that we believe will make a real difference. So it is a very tough time, and we've tried to be responsive to the difficulties that people are encountering every day in their lives. But we also believe that this is a time for philanthropy to lead with creativity and some vision and some boldness, and to try to help people out of a pretty difficult circumstance. I'm relatively new to the city, and one of the things that I've really been struck by is the resilience of the city's people. I mean, not very many communities have gotten knocked around quite the way this community has, and yet everywhere you go there's a sense of optimism, a sense of being able to come through this even stronger than when you began. And so I think our challenge at Kresge is to figure out how to reinforce and strengthen those impulses. We're looking for people who are doing good work. We're looking for people who are sort of posturing their work for the future, poising their work for the future. And we're ultimately, I think, trying to make investments that will help us change the sort of the basic wiring of the community for the long term. And what I've been pleasantly surprised by is how responsive people have been to that. People really want to roll their sleeves up, get back to work, and figure out how we're going to position ourselves for the next generation of our community's life. Well, I think Kresge is where the community is, which is strongly realistic about the challenges we face, and yet sort of eternally optimistic that you can really make the assets of this community work for a much more beneficial, healthful future. So one of the strengths of this community is not only that it has these great internal resources on which to draw, but that it has connections into national networks of nonprofit organizations and philanthropic organizations who are eager to work here. And I think a strength of Skillman and the strength of many of the other organizations in Detroit is that it is able to reach out, draw those people in, and find beneficial ways in which they can have real enduring impact on the life of the community. It's a remarkable philanthropic community. I think sometimes we take that for granted here in Southeast Michigan. We have foundations that are large and small that are some of the most effective foundations of their kind in America, and I think Skillman is absolutely emblematic of that. I knew of Skillman's work well before I came to Kresge, but to watch it close up and see day to day the kind of intelligence, responsiveness, and effectiveness that Skillman brings to the work has been really inspiring. My sense is that the Skillman Foundation has come to play an extraordinarily important role in this community. From the top on down, from Carol on down, there is a tone of graciousness, of intelligence, of purposefulness that I think is very unusual in philanthropy. Philanthropy often sort of takes an opportunity to get behind hard issues, sort of duck behind hard issues, because it's just hard. You've got to take risks, you've got to be smart, you've got to be strategic, and so many times that's just not exactly part of the philanthropic repertoire. But in Skillman's case, it absolutely is. They've taken on seemingly intractable challenges like neighborhood revitalization and stabilization, or the improvement of the public school system, and really leaned into it in a way that is making a huge difference in this community. And I think we often don't acknowledge how very, very important that kind of leadership can play in a community that's sort of struggling for its identity. Because I think what Skillman does is root our community in a sense of possibility. And Carol has done that with, I think, extraordinary grace and thoughtfulness and commitment. And I think she, in many ways, is the philanthropic leader of our community, and someone to whom we constantly look for guidance into how to really tackle these really tough issues facing Detroit. The glass is really more than half full. We have just this enormous repository of assets to build on. We've got a magnificent physical infrastructure in Detroit. We have a human spirit that just refuses to be beaten down. We have individuals who are creative in all directions, from the cultural sector to the commercial sector to the nonprofit sector. And I think the challenge as a result is trying to figure out how to tap those resources and pull them together in a very different direction. And I think that's happening. And frankly, I think that's one of the ways in which philanthropy can be most helpful. I think we can help line up those assets, suggest a different kind of direction going forward, and then really figuring out what it's going to take to marshal the resources necessary to operationalize all of that in a way that pays true benefit to the community. It is so often the case that we think about a declining population base or a declining industrial base or flight of young people from our community, and that's just a cycle that almost any community will go through during bad time. I think, when I think of Detroit, of a community that begins to grow again. And it grows around its assets. It grows around its educational institutions, around its medical institutions, around its cultural institutions, around its sense of civic possibility. And so my hope in 10 years and 15 years, actually my hope in 5 years, is that we'll see a very different attitude about the possibilities of coming to Detroit, living in Detroit, putting down roots in Detroit, creating new businesses in Detroit. And I think that the critical mass will generate quite quickly, actually. I don't think it's going to take the usual 20 years that people talk about. I think to fully diversify our economy, to fully get us back on the road to full and robust recovery will take probably a 10, 15-year time period. But I think in terms of seeing a very different Detroit with a different sense of energy, a different sense of possibility, is something we're going to see very soon. And I think that's what philanthropy is working for. I think we're looking at trying to reform the educational system to make sure that people in our community feel that their kids will get the first-rate education if they choose to live in Detroit. I think we're thinking about trying to ensure the continuing stability and robustness of our cultural and arts organizations so that people feel that the quality of life they enjoy here is a quality of life that will attract new people to the community. And I think perhaps most importantly, I think we want to create a sense of economic opportunity so that the residents of Detroit who are now here can see different kinds of pathways into the mainstream economy, because I think ultimately our great talent is the people who live here. We want to attract new people, to be sure, but the people who are here are going to build the Detroit of the future.